the webinars.
Sorry, just wanted to make sure that I was recording this.
We were talking about these webinars, and she had a story that she thought would be significant or something that would, work with the clientele that we have here today. How you doing today, Shauna?
I'm good. Thanks, Tom.
Great.
Pleasure to be here. So what I wanted to share today is obviously we do this every day, right? Moving is a very stressful time. We have crews on the streets every single day. We recognize the stress that the customers are going through. And I thought it was very appropriate to share a very review that we received back from a customer that kind of tells the story of what we do on a daily basis. So this particular customer had reached out to us on behalf of her sister, who was elderly, and in 2020, not only experiencing the pandemic and being quarantined, she lost her husband of several years. And at the same time, she was also going to have to go through a life event of downsizing a home that she had lived in for decades. So if you're not familiar with ever having to move or the moving industry, one of the things that we know is moving your home is actually one of the top 3 stressors in your life. The next one, the top one, I guess, above moving is losing a spouse. So this lady was already at the top 2 stressors that she's ever going to deal with in her life. As you can imagine, it was a very emotional time. She was struggling trying to determine what she should be bringing, and we would anticipate with what she was going through, she had a hard time letting go of a lot of things, which is what we see on a daily basis when folks have to make this decision. It's just too hard. So what happened in this particular situation is the customer's sister who wrote the review was nothing short of absolutely amazed, not only for the amount of items that were moved. And Steve, if you could share that slide, I want to give everybody a little bit of a perspective of how much she brought with her. So the picture there on the left, the JK tractor trailer, she had over 30,000 pounds of household items. It more than filled that tractor trailer. And on the right side of the screen, you see the JK straight truck. And if you go from the front to the back, about the middle where the K starts is about how far back the rest of her shipment was. So trying to fit that much furniture, that number of memories in a 4,000 square foot house was challenging. Knowing her circumstances, because that's part of what we do. It's not just putting something on the truck, it's becoming a part of that customer's life, understanding what they're going through and providing the stress-free move that we do. We understood her challenges. We understood what she was going through. We employed 2 of our top move managers, very senior move managers that could work with her hand in hand, not just on the street, but also her customer support person on my team that was available after hours, on the weekends. And just to kind of, I want to share some of the excerpts from her Google review. Is she started with just finishing dealing with JK moving from a move from Virginia to Kentucky for my frail, elderly sister who had lost her husband to COVID about 3 months ago. She brought way too much stuff into her new home. The driver and crew had an enormous job of moving in and setting up her household of over 25,000 pounds. The driver was the calmest and kindest soul I'd ever encountered, and he was the perfect guy. Out of the 5 stars, I would give them 6.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Now you referred to using a move manager. Is that move managers on your staff, or is that senior move managers like an external hired consultant?
Nope. So a move manager the move manager is the driver of the truck. He is the one that facilitates everything. He runs the job. He runs the crew. It's the actual driver on the truck is our move manager, and she actually dealt with two separate move managers because of her situation. And the second move manager, she said that she had never seen a crew work like this as hard as they did, except for 50 years ago, as she watched her dad, farm hands, and brothers work on the tobacco farm. So that was really great. And also the other move manager was another one of our senior move managers, and very kind, very patient. Again, understands what the customer goes through, and it's not just putting furniture and boxes on and off a truck. We understand there's so much more to it.
I love it. Well, thank you, Shauna, for jumping in. I love the fact that we can showcase the other team members at JK, hear a real life story, and kind of, it's fascinating to know that. I'd be curious how many pounds are in my house. You know, it's not a way that I think of measuring household content.
Exactly.
But, yeah. So
we can come by and let you know, Steve.
Yeah.
Tom took the words right out of my mouth.
Wow. No, awesome. Well, thanks so much. And,
of course. My pleasure.
All right. So let's
Thank
see.
you, Sean.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Let's see here. We will now, we get to jump in with our guest of honor. Not that Shauna wasn't a major guest of honor for us today, but we get to meet Marni Jameson here, who is a best-selling author. And I stumbled into Marni because she just came out with a new book called What to Do with Everything You Own to Leave the Legacy You Want. And I remember when I saw the news article about it, Tom, I was like, oh, this is perfect for our monthly discussion.
Sure.
So Marni, let's get to know you a little bit better. I understand you're a journalist and a syndicated columnist, and that you're not a move manager. You're a reporter and journalist. So you're sort of covering this topic, which is really intriguing to me. How did you get into this?
Well, I'm just the girl next door who's too out of you and has a press pass. I just stumbled into it because I've been writing my syndicated column, which is really a home design and home improvement column and lifestyle column for 18 years. And about 6 years ago, I went through that task that almost none of us gets out of this world without having to do, which was cleaning out my parents' house. And they lived in the same house in California for almost 50 years. And they were moving into assisted living. They were in their late 80s. And my brother was taking care of all the financial stuff, the executor stuff, and I was, taking care of the family home. And I flew in from Florida, figured it'll take me a week, no big deal. And oh man, was it the hardest thing I've ever done. So I started writing some columns about that whole process. And I got all these emails from my readers, and I told my agent, I think I've got a book here, and AARP jumped on the bandwagon, and boom, we wrote Downsizing the Family Home, which came out in 2016. And that led to a whole new world for me. Again, I'm just interviewing people as I go. And I wanted to find out, I talked to the estate planners and the appraisers and the grief counselors and the psychologists and families who've been through it. And I just got the stories and understanding why we get so attached to things. So I get the idea. The publisher said, I've read this myself. Now I could really use a workbook to help me through this. So I then came out with the Downsizing the Family Home, a workbook, which is sort of a scrapbook journal, a place that you could take a picture of the grandfather clock and write about how it came to the family and where it ultimately went without saving it, right? And same with the wedding dress or your grandfather's fishing tackle. You can just write about it, journal about it, and get rid of the thing and keep the memory, which is sort of the whole idea. And then, life being life, I went through my own downsizing, which was not planned, but I ended up leaving a marriage 5 years, and it wasn't easy. And I had a house full of stuff. I moved to Florida, and fates would allow, I met a wonderful man, and we got remarried about 5 years ago. And he was a widower. He had a house full of stuff. And he'd been married 27 years, had a full life. I had all my stuff and my memories and what to do when you want to, you might love the guy, not his stuff so much. So I had to figure out how to make two houses become one. And I wrote Downsizing the Blended Home, which is a journey in itself, because some people don't get married just because they can't stand the other person's dining room table. So we get through that. And then most recently, as you know, just this week, in fact, What to Do with Everything You Own to Leave the Legacy You Want came out. And that, again, all the best ideas are not mine. A publisher reached out to me and said, hey, I really love to have this book and I can't find it out there. Could you write it? And I said, well, that sounds like estate planning and wills, and I'm not an attorney or an accountant or a financial planner. He says, no, but it's actually the ultimate downsizing, isn't it? How to take care of everything so you leave a blessing and not a burden to your family. And so that got me running on another investigative track, and here we are.
Wow. What a journey. And we're really excited to tap into your knowledge there. I was able to glance at your workbook, and I have to say, I wish I had known that had existed years ago, because one of the things that I've been talking about to our readers is how so many times we scrapbook our family activities and our families, but we don't scrapbook about the possessions that we have. And, scrapbooking used to be a big thing, and people would take pictures of all the Thanksgiving dinners, but you don't write about the table and write about the armoire, the thing that is so difficult to give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Marni, you downsized yourself and your parents. What was the difference? What was so hard and what was worse? And how did you make it easier for yourself?
It's really hard. It's harder to do your parents' things, I believe. I think it's hard enough to downsize your own belongings because you're dealing with your past. You're coming to terms with the fact that life is moving on. Maybe you have to get rid of your kids' baby clothes because now they're in college, and you think, oh darn, So you're just dealing with really, just the life transitions, and you have to accept those. So it's about moving along. But when you deal with your parents' things, it's this level of respect. You want to be a good steward. You honor the family legacy. You don't want to erase them in any way, shape, or form. But if you are an adult with a house, you can't layer on another house that was your family. So it's very difficult. So I worked through a lot of the knots, not easily, was tearful at times, but figuring out things like maybe we sell some of this family furniture and I turn it into scholarships for my kids' college. So I'm repurposing and channeling my parents' energy and their love and the things they did love and their passion for life and what they earned with their work into something that will have a sustaining legacy. And I think if you can you'll feel a lot better about that. But man, it's hard to go through. One of the things that I talk about in all my books is the whole concept of endowment, which is a big fancy psychological word, but it's why we get attached to stuff. And it starts when kids are babies and they get attached to a teddy bear or a blanket. It's their security object for when mom or dad aren't nearby to give a hug to, and they cling on to these things, and it's a replacement for that human connection. And it's a prop, right? But we never give it up. We change it for other things. We get attached to, it might be our car or our wedding ring or an outfit we wore occasion or a purse we bought when we took a trip to Italy, but we endow these things with meaning, and they are just things, but they are primitively important to us. So I think if you can start unpacking the stories and the why we get attached and understand the concept of endowment, just that awareness helps you go, oh, there's that endowment thing kicking in again. I can deal with that. It helps you move on.
Yeah, so many times when I hear stories like yours where we go through this process and it may have been challenging with our parents, we become better parents or better stewards to the other generation. But you know, the amount of guilt sometimes that our parents put us through, like, you know, you have to take my fine china, you know, even though you've already got it. Any stories or suggestions that you sort of stumbled into on ways to creatively help mom understand that, yeah, I really don't want the whole china collection?
Yeah, I wrote a column called "The Kids Don't Want Your Stuff," and it was kind of, and I had all these young adults saying, "Thank you, I'm giving this column to my parents," and I had all these parents smacking their foreheads, going, "I've asked her if she wants the headboard now 5 times, and I'm just going to give it to her anyway." I'm like, "No, the whole point is to have your kid. If they say no, they don't want it, believe them. If they regret it later, isn't that the point of being a parent, is to make them learn by their mistakes? So move on. Don't force feed anything. I think that my parents were from a generation where they kept everything. My mom, she was 89 and had her maternity clothes. I'm like, Mom, I believe in medical miracles, but I thought they'd make nice drapes. No, this is no way to go through life. And she saved every greeting card. I mean, they just were crazy hoarders, and they didn't have a big house anyway. So I look at that and it makes me streamline all the time. I think of my kids. I have 2 children and my husband has 3, so we have a blended family of 5. I don't want to leave a mess to them. It'd be chaos for them to come into all that. So I'm always really thinking about, even though I think I have many, many good years left, I really look at everything, go, gosh, what if my poor kids had to come across this? I'm going to do the heavy lifting now, clean this stuff out. So I think that if you sort of see the avalanche that's coming and you've dealt with the avalanche once, you are less inclined to leave that burden to your children.
So speaking of children and families, how do you avoid a lot of these conflicts, especially when they're blended families or just the siblings themselves, right?
Yeah, it's a crazy mess if you don't have a few conversations ahead of time. And one of the things I learned after talking to a lot of estate lawyers who spend their lives, really their careers, dealing with families of high net worth who are fighting over the salt shakers, and it's insane. So of course I'm not one of those families, but I think that if you just lay it all out and have the talk with them, I know they have a joke about that talk about the facts of life happens twice, one about sex and one about dying. So, it's if you need to talk to your parents, or your parents need to talk to the kids about when that day comes. And this is a fact of life. And here is how I would like the chips to fall. And this is why Sally's getting the farm and Johnny's getting the Corvette or whatever. You just lay it all out there. And then you also get from them, what is it you want? What do you want from my life that would be meaningful to you? And what don't you want? So I'm not presuming, which is, like Steve brought up, big mistake to just assume they want the family china. Maybe they hate it. So get it clear, have the conversation, and you're going to head off a lot of, and also let them know, for instance, if you have a Steinway piano or something and you want to give it to the church, and maybe somebody's counting on it in the family and you just didn't communicate that, and there your will comes and they're disappointed. So this is a chance for you to run all the traps, let them know, have them see it in writing, deal with the conflict then and there, and don't be a chicken. I mean, you may end up with some awkward conversations, but it's better than leaving this world and having your kids not talking to each other.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think oftentimes those of us who are in this period of transition, that's what we hear is mom passed away, but there was never a conversation. You talk about the facts of life. The other thing that people don't like to have the conversation about is money and assets, and in some families that's a no-no. Well, now mom is gone and, we're trying to pick up the pieces and meet her wishes, and it creates a lot of conflict. Catherine McCallum she gets the gold star today for the first question to come in. And I knew this was going to come in because it comes in every time we do this topic, is what do you do when you come across a hoarder? Any stories or words of wisdom in that area?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because there's a lot of psychological underpinnings to that, and you do have to be sensitive. So, a couple ways to attack it. It's like how to eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So ask them to show you an area that is the least important to them. The part they're least connected to. Maybe it's tools in the garage. Maybe it's the linen closet. Something that isn't going to trigger a whole lot of attachment. Try to start chipping away there and organizing one place. And if they can see potentially how nice it is to have order and cleanliness and the extra real estate that it opens up, maybe then they can start to gain some momentum. They're going to need someone to do it with them. And the other trick I like to consider, and I do this, I just did it when I cleaned out my closet, is the trial separation, right? You don't have to divorce everything at once. You can let's just put this in a bin and let's just put it out in the garage, or I'll keep it in my garage. I won't give it away. And let's see how you feel in 6 months. And if your life hasn't ended between now and then, I mean facetious, but if you've learned that you can live without this, maybe in fact, we can take it to the Goodwill.
Yeah. And I'm glad I'm glad you had mentioned, that the hoarding is there's a deeper problem there. One of the other esteemed guests that we've had on is Matt Paxton, who is one of the hosts of that show, Hoarders. And what he always reiterates is, you can take the alcohol out of the alcoholic's hand, but they're going to find another way to get it. The reason that they're drinking is there's this deep-seated problem, and you've got to identify that problem. And so I always like to sort of quote him, and you've reiterated this, Marni, is that, we can clean out a hoarder's house, but, making sure that we do our best to get those people in some kind of therapeutic treatment is really important. It's bizarre, but what drives someone to be a hoarder is oftentimes can be similar to what drives people to use drugs or alcohol or do other kind of behavior.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different hoarders, if you will. I know, Marni, you said, your parents hoarders, they kept things. There's the clean hoarders, and then there's the dirty hoarders, right? I mean, there's people that just don't know how to get rid of anything. When I mean anything, I mean trash and the whole ball of wax. And being movers, walking into something like that is horrible. And then there's the people that just have a lot of stuff, right? And what is the true definition of a hoarder? And I know Shauna, she wanted to show some pictures, but I think we'll hold off on that for now. Maybe if we have a different series, we could possibly share some of the scenes that we've seen.
Oh, do you have some hoarding photos, Shauna?
I always have hoarding photos.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we definitely do that at a different time. But yeah, we run into that quite often. And normally what happens with that is they're going to do their own packing and it never comes to fruition. So it continues to snowball. So yeah, typical.
Man. Yeah, no, I definitely, I every time we share hoarding photos on these discussions, it's just an eye opener. So maybe next month that's how we'll kick off the discussions with some of these.
There you go.
Yeah. Let's see. Bob Colson has a question, and he says, my 86-year-old dad is a lifelong craftsman. Giving up my tools is like putting my kids in foster care. How would you have handled this one? What are your tips on navigating the things that we really are emotionally attached to?
I love that question, and I've gotten it before, men and their tools. And I think people overlook how bonded men are to their tools, and they look at women and their furniture and their china. And this is really important. I think it's where we have to get real about what the next generation wants. And My dad was an engineer. He had a tool shed full of stuff, and my brother had no interest. He was an architect and had zero interest at all in the tools. And he would hire someone for that. And that's where our current generation is. I mean, my dad could change a carburetor and a garbage disposal in an afternoon, but my husband sure can't. So, but he has other good qualities. So I think that we have to realize that these tools that you spend a lot of money for don't have the value today. And that's true of so many things we have spent a lot of money for. It just, you cannot expect to get like compensation. So you might do yourself a favor and go online and see what our set of Craftsman tools going for. Oh, a lot less than I thought. And try to sell them on Craigslist or some local next door platform that you have, Facebook Market or whatever, and try to put them into the hands of someone who will appreciate them if it's not someone in your family. But really, really own that times have changed and tools are not for the next generation what they were to your generation. And if you can put them in the hands of someone who will appreciate them, that's a wonderful thing. Don't worry about making your money back. So I think just letting go of some of the like someone needs to pay for these, what I paid for them, that's you're gonna be sitting with them for a long time.
Yeah, and that's a really good comment, Marni. And I'm just thinking about my own community. The community center here in my community has this public workshop that, all the Cub Scouts work on their Pinewood Derby cars and things of that nature. Yeah. For Bob's question, perhaps, Dad was involved in Cub Scouts or, various groups, maybe the high school shop or something like that, where it's sort of like, wow, my legacy is living on with these tools with an organization that I have supported my whole life.
And you bring up such a great point in that if you leave this to your family to deal with when the day comes, they are not going to deal with it as well as you will now. So I don't want anyone, when I talk about downsizing, I really talk about right sizing. Don't give up stuff you need, use, and love and enjoy. I mean, keep everything that you love and use. Get rid of what you don't need, what you don't use, and what you don't love. And if your days are over of working with your tools, you will be very much better, the better person of finding a good home for those and feeling the peace of mind and satisfaction that comes from placing them in a community center like you discussed, than if your kids just kick it to the curb, which I was there. I put some things on the curb that my parents might not wanted it on the curb. So, be a good steward of your own belongings while you can.
Yeah. And, Bob has had a follow-up in comments, and Bob, this I'm sure resonates with everybody, is people who have experienced poverty or scarcity, like the Great Depression, don't share the same values as our throwaway culture. Have you seen this, and do you have any helpful ideas on how you can sort of bridge that generational mindset that exists oftentimes between the generations?
Yeah, my parents were of that generation too. And, for them, a set of sheets was a big wedding present, and they kept those sheets. I remember my mom ironed sheets. I mean, that was before PermaPress came along. And now you can get sheets at Target for $30 and you change them with the color, and, 1 week you want flowers and 1 week you don't. And they're just not as valued. So again, we just kind of have to keep up with the times. And I'm not about replacing things. In fact, I want to write a book called Buy It Once, Buy It Right. Like get the sheets right the first time so you don't have a bunch of in your closet that don't work for you and you don't like. But it's just, we have had the ability through manufacturing and importing and whatever to have a lot of merchandise. And the generation just before mine was the largest consuming generation of all time, of all history. And I'm still in part of it, but just before me and with me, and I'm probably with all of us, we have had the largest consuming culture of all time, which means we're going to have way too much stuff. So just get some perspective. That was then, this is now. The Depression is not today. We have too much stuff. I mean, 1 in 4 people cannot park their cars in their garage. That's insane. 1 in 10 people have a storage locker. That's even more insane. So you just have to live within your space, and your space is finite. Your stuff is not. Get rid of your stuff and make it work for your space.
Wow, some great quotes there. The I mentioned in the beginning that our audience can oftentimes be just as valuable of a resource as our presenters. And Sylvia Baldaras, who's a professional art organizer, says, here's my tip of the day. If you struggle to give something away, take a picture of it first. Once you have the picture, it's easier to give away the sentimental items. Good tip, Sylvia. And I imagine your Downsizing the Family Home workbook
Exactly.
can work hand in hand with photos. Is that correct?
Yeah, I like to say it's a baptismal gown and there's no more kids coming along. Cut a little swatch of it out, take a picture of the baby in the baptismal gown, right when it all happened, and give the dress, get rid of the dress, turn it into a throw pillow. I don't care. But you don't need to keep everything. Take a picture, maybe take a swatch of it, like the fishing tackle box. If your grandpa was a big fly fisherman, get his favorite fly, stick it in the book, take a picture of grandpa fishing, write his favorite fishing holes, move on.
Yeah. The and Bob Coulson, Bob, you win the gold star today with a great scenario and a lot of good questions and follow-up. And just so everybody knows, he says, good answer. We ended up finding a buyer organization who valued vintage tools. They came and gathered them and gave him checks for them. So he became happy, but he also saved a few special tools that he still uses today. Oh, and Dad's still here today. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could see, like somebody who's moving into a senior living community, a lot of times these places have workshops and sometimes they need tools, although they generally have more tools than they can deal with. But you could see where you could creatively, have like some tools as almost decorations or ornaments in somebody's apartment. And what a great memory that would be to think about. All right, let's see. Okay, questions are coming in here. Tom, you feel free to jump in if you see any that you think look good, but I'll just, you know me, I'm kind of hard to shut up here. Okay, well, this is kind of interesting, sort of the opposite of what we have been talking about. This person who's anonymous says, I have little contact with my children and they're not interested in any of my stuff. There are plenty of businesses that are happy to make a living having estate sales. When and if the time comes to leave my home, I'll take what I want and need and let one of those businesses make the hard decisions. Number one, I think that is a very healthy comment. Would you agree? But Marni, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I write about that in Downsizing the Family Home, as well as in the newest book, What to Do with Everything You Own to Leave the Legacy You Want. I mean, I'll deal with people who are childless. They may have no children, many children, someone else's children. They don't speak to their children, whatever it is. Families upended, extended. It's all over the map. But what you need to focus on, and what sounds like this woman is, I think it's a woman, maybe not, is clearly getting her head around, is that if you decide what to do, pick a charity and just liquidate everything. I write about a couple. It's just they're such a dear couple in Albuquerque, and they are married. They're in their 70s, and they have never had children. They married out of high school. Lovely couple. They love art. They traveled the world. They're not really wealthy, but they were both school teachers, but they've saved money. It helps not to have kids. You have more money when you don't, turns out. And they are giving 100% of everything they own. They have a huge art collection, not all of it's special, to the Albuquerque Art Museum, because that's where they go and have lunch every Friday. They walk around the museum, they have a glass of wine, they have lunch, they enjoy it. There's no place they'd rather be. And every single thing, they have a service that's going to come in, sell everything, their cars, their house, their clothes, you name it. And 100% of it is going to benefit the museum. And they have figured it out and they have set it up and everything's going into the corner pocket and they are at peace.
And, I got a question related to that on your book, your new book, the everything, what to do with everything you own to leave the legacy you want. You had mentioned that in doing this book, you interviewed a lot of estate planning attorneys and things of that nature. One of the things that I like to remind people of that was reiterated on that question is that sometimes your family is not like there's this pressure that we have to give things to our family. And oftentimes we forget that our friends, our network, the organizations that we're part of are sometimes more close and more dear than our blood relatives. Did you have any anecdotes in the book that sort of related to that?
Yeah, and another
Oftentimes,
one was,
yeah,
sometimes our kids are set. They did well. You did your job. They're doing their job. They don't need your assets. They don't need any more. So that's another time to have that conversation. If y'all are doing well, in fact, I had a family where this doesn't happen often enough, but who said, "Mom, don't give us anything. Give it to a charity that you love. You give it away to some place that would make." And she was as happy as a kid at a birthday party. She was just free to give her money into causes that she felt would be really well served, and they are more needing of it. So absolutely. And I had to talk to a financial planner who was also a certified public accountant. My age, kids are about the same age, and he says one of his kids is just messing up. She just is making a lot of poor choices, and she treats the family with disrespect. The other's an angel. She's very respectful of the family. She's getting it all right. Guess who's getting most of the money? And he said, I can change that anytime if she turns her life around. But when I cross that finish line, that's your report card that day. Boom, game over. So,
wow.
you can, it's like they have this expression, the mort man, which means the dead hand, if you can roll from the grave. So your last word is still going to be out there.
Man. Okay, I'm going to blend I'm going to hit you with two questions / comments because they sort of intersect. First off, Bob, our gold star winner, says, what's the difference between a hoarder and collector? But then I want to add on to that the comment from Catherine McCallum, which says, one of the best guidances I received was from an Antiques Roadshow expert for a book collector. The joy was in collecting. Have your children choose a few collections and give them permission to sell the rest. You have that meaning in hand without the burden. Not a question, but just a comment. But while we're on the topic of collectors and hoarders, do you have a good definition between the two of those?
I actually have a few chapters on that written exactly on that question in my book. But to summarize, a collector goes with a purpose. They know just what they're going for. They want that certain Barbie doll or that certain coin or that certain baseball card. They catalog it. They care about it. They remember when they got their first one. They know what their next one is. They're very organized about it. They're not just randomly collecting it, not letting go of stuff that comes into their house. So while you may think it's crazy that somebody is collecting Pez dispensers, they don't feel that way, but they're very organized about it, and they catalog it. So that's the difference. The other is just not cataloged, not with no rhyme or reason. It's very impulsive. It's not organized. So I wrongly made a suggestion once, and I corrected myself in my column that I talked to these two pharmacists. They were married to one another, and they had a collection of mortars and pestles that, like 100 of them they had collected because that was a cool thing for them. And they wanted to, at their funeral, give one away to everybody who came. I said, that is weird. I mean, that is just a weird thing to do. I said, well, maybe you should just keep them all and give them to a pharmaceutical society or a museum of medical archives or whatever. Actually, no, giving them each away to people that would really appreciate them, the one-offs, is a better way to go than trying to give the whole collection en masse anywhere, because nobody loves it like they do. They're the collector, but the one-offs is the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And what are those things called? The Hummels, or
Yeah, not
yeah,
worth much.
figurines.
Yeah,
I've been told the same thing with those, is nobody wants that whole collection, but everybody could keep one to remember mom,
yeah, yeah.
so okay, let's
Yeah,
see.
that seems to really be the theme with the hoarder, the collector, the the father who had a whole collection of things. Keep one or two of the most favorite things that they can cherish and remember, and then you're right. Somehow dispose of the rest, whether it's to somebody who really needs it, somebody who wants it, um, and that's what it is, right? Just that one or two things to make that memory really well.
So one of the things I talk about in downsizing is when everything is important, nothing is important. So when you're going through your parents' belongings, you're tempted to keep so much. But if you pick the 5 things that really help you resonate from your mom or your dad, and you put those in your home, then they are truly cherished mementos. And it's not adding another layer of clutter to your life.
Let's see. John Hinkle says, I have a retired military client who hoards survivalist gear, huge crisis, societal meltdown type stuff. He built a big barn in his backyard to store all of his stuff for his big family. And he's concerned that there's like expiration of freshness on some of these items that he's had in there for so long. Any words of wisdom for John and his client? Man, people are giving us some pretty good challenges here.
Yeah, there are experts in just about everything, it turns out. I interview one in my book who's a world-class auctioneer of old farm equipment. Who knew? And I'm a city girl, so I'm like, well, who would care about an old tractor? Oh, believe you me, he sold one for $500,000.
Yep.
And but there was a woman who became a banker, and her dad had 7 garages full of farm gear, and she was like, what the heck am I going to do with this? Well, some of it is combustible, and you can't just go in there willy-nilly and start dealing with it, turning it on and stuff. So you need an expert, and there you can find one who can go in and figure out what you have and what might be dangerous and what needs to be disposed of in a certain environmentally friendly way, where there's a market. So find that pro. That person's out there.
Yeah, and you raise a valid point there, and hopefully this is helpful to John, is that if you can find a survivalist expert out there to come and do the analysis of this setup, more than likely that individual will now respect the advice of that person. And let's just hope that they don't suggest let's add more stuff to this barn. But I do think that you're probably right on that it needs to be improved on. Now, this is again from Bob. This is a great one. I love things like this. Is there a connection on holding on to stuff and one's mortality? Part of immortality, striving to hold on to stuff that others don't value. But I think there probably is something to that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there is definitely. That's what we cling to, is our life and every passing phase. And when we start letting go of one phase, we have to acknowledge that we're getting older. And as we get older, there's that end line is coming closer. We don't know after this pandemic. Heck, we all take life a little bit less for granted than we used to. We don't know when our number's up, and we do need to think about that. But I like to remind people that making a plan to create an estate plan and creating a will and having figured out where you want your stuff to go when you're gone is not a death wish. And it's not going to make you die any faster. It's just, let's just be rational about that. And I also like to say, I have to remind myself, I didn't want to talk about this subject either. I was like, well, I have to get a stiff shot of something before I can face this topic. But we're all going to be dead for a lot longer than we're alive, period. So let's face it, let's be nice about it. Let's be organized about it and leave a legacy that shows those who come behind you that mom had it all figured out. Good for her. She could have made things a lot worse on us. It was bad enough that she had to leave us, but she made it as painless as it could have been in that respect. And I just
Yeah.
think I'm not going to die any sooner because I've got my papers in order.
And Eileen has a great tip, and I don't know if she's your best friend or your daughter, but she says giving Marni's workbook as a gift, along with a conversation about downsizing, can soothe and overwhelm the enormity of years collecting. I agree with that. Is that oftentimes, you know, we come in there as adult children or clients, and we're trying to solve all the problems. But if you were able to leave something that mom could kind of reflect on over the period of 2 or 3 months, and maybe pick it up and open it, and it's sort of like, you know, do you find that your books are sometimes used that way?
Yeah, in fact, I have this older cousin. He's about 20 years older than I am. And I was always the bratty little kid. You know, he never take me seriously. He was Mr. I work in the defense industry and I'm all that. And he and his wife were going into a retirement home, just, you know, downsizing and looking at a home that they're going to go and settle down in. And the woman handed him a copy of my book. And he didn't even know I'd written it. And he's like, I'll be darned. So it can help, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, I found people in senior centers are giving it out as a way, and even realtors are giving it out. Again, they're never going to sell their house until they start downsizing some of their stuff. So it's a service to everyone to get them to get their head around these things. And I try to give them empathetic advice. You know, I went through it. It was really hard. Why it's hard, what you can do, what makes it less painful, how to think about it, how to reframe it. And we all have to do it at some point, whether it's our own stuff or loved ones. And it's I hope I may take some of the sting out of it.
Great. And here's another good one from Bob. When you're talking about the Albuquerque Art Museum, he was talking about, you know, often people donate things to a church and it clutters up the church space. And then everybody's afraid to move these items because here was these loyal members of the church. Have you ever had a situation like that? And I'm wondering, Tom, has JK ever been sort of called in to sort of remove the clutter from these church or nonprofit spaces?
Not necessarily that, but have sent like library full of books and different things to different universities that they were willed at. And I always wondered on the other end, once after we delivered them, what really happens with these books, you know? And that seems, you know, books and artwork were probably the most common ones over the years that I've seen. But I didn't even think about the pianos and, you know, how many pianos can a church have, whether they have, maybe have a school with it or something like that. But, you know, after a while, they can't have all that material stuff, right?
Well, you know, where I see something like this is when I drop things at Goodwill. You know, I probably go every other month, and I'm pulling out all this stuff, and you can see the guys sort of putting them in certain bins, and you know that like probably 3/4 of that is going to some trash bin because it's useless. You know, even for Goodwill.
Well, what Goodwill does, like, let's say clothing, they'll take maybe some of the more used clothing that aren't really there to give to the next person. They'll put it in a bin and it'll go to a recycle place that'll make towels and pot holders and what different stuff there is. So yeah, they do have a recycle or a refurbish for that.
Oh, and a follow-up on that, Eileen says churches often help out the community to get rid of items, having a summer sale or providing those items to a community. But Bob, you bring up a really valid point there.
I think really good takeaway for everyone is everybody would rather have the cash. So giving all your stuff to the church, if you can liquidate it or they will liquidate it and turning that cash into a benefit so they can give it to a mission, that's what everybody wants in the end. And it's also really important to never assume that any organization wants anything that you have. The Louvre does not want your marble collection or grandma's cross-stitch hankies. We all think they're fantastic, but get real. So ask the museum before you just leave something on their doorstep, because they're not going to likely want it. They're going to want to sell it. and get the cash for it.
So let's see. Wow. Okay, we're down. We got 5 minutes to 1 here, and lots of great comments in chat. I'm glad you guys are sharing your ideas and your tips and things of that nature. Catherine asks about when should you start identifying what goes where and how specific should it be?
I think you should make it a lifelong effort. I don't think there's any one time. It's not a one and done process. I think you need to purge as you live. And as much as you can, just take it on one at a time before it snowballs. And it's a way of life, really looking at everything you own and asking yourself, do I need it? Do I use it? Do I love it? And holding it up and saying, would I buy this again? Or, and then letting it go. And don't let all those usual, but it was expensive, but I wore it to my daughter's first birthday party, but so-and-so gave it to me. None of those head trips. Don't get hung up on those. Just really say, is this useful to me now? Maybe somebody else can use it, and let it go. And that should be a way of life.
Yeah. And that echoes the comment that it's anonymous, but it says, I have better uses for my time than cleaning closets. At this point in my time is more valuable than money. I think that's a very healthy statement.
I have a cousin who has 4 kids, and they're adult kids, and he's like, I'm just going to let them deal with it all. I'm not doing anything. I did enough for them. They can clean up after me. That's an attitude. Fine. That's totally fine. I think there may be some skirmishes, but.
Oh, and my mom is sort of the same way. Not that she wants to dump it all on us. She just can't mentally deal with it. And us as 4 kids, we understand it. And we're like, that's fine, Mom. Your life's too valuable right now. Don't worry about it. Let's go have some fun, and we'll deal with it when you leave.
And
fair enough.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I mean, that's oftentimes we don't want, these are adults and we love them. And so it's sort of like, okay, let's come up with the plan for the future. Okay, any good tips on how to dispose of flags or cremation ashes of beloved people or pets? Wow, that's a good question.
Sure. Well, it gets back to the wishes of the person. If they want to have their ashes scattered at sea, well, maybe you honor that. My husband, when I married him, I picked up a box. I said, what's in here? He said, oh, Sitka's ashes. I was like, oh, that's the dog. I'm like, up to you then. I'm not touching that one. But, he has them in a little box. That's his way of remembering a beloved family pet. But I think that those things can go back to nature in a respectful way, my opinion, but it's very personal. As for flags, gosh, I think there's special ways you need to keep them and fold them, and maybe ask if there's any sort of state society or military center that would like to honor these or keep these flags. I think they need to be handled reverently.
Yeah, actually, Sylvia says in the chat, flags can be donated to military cemeteries. They will be reused. So that's good to know.
That's nice.
Great. Yeah. Wow. We're at 1 o'clock. Oh, Boy Scouts dispose of flags properly too. Thank you for that, Sandy. And Bob, again, thanks, Bob, for all the great insights and questions today. But he says, whenever your kids are moving, that could be a time to give them items. Also, grandkids, your grandkids are trying to furnish their homes and things like that. It might be an opportunity to sort of pass some of these items on where it can really impact a young person's life in early on. And let's see, American Legion. And
I do like to add that parents don't use, oh, my kids could use it someday, oh, my grandkids could use it someday, as a default excuse to hoard things that you should get rid of. So and in reverse, sometimes you say to your kids, I've got this whole box of stuff that belongs to you. Will you please take it? Oh, but I don't have any room for it right now, Mom. I'll do it later. You are not a storage locker for your kids' belongings. It's on them. Ship it to them, get it out of your house, and make it their responsibility. And I don't think you should be holding on to stuff for some day to come unless it's right, it's very present, my opinion.
Great. And I tell you, that's a great way for us to wrap everything up. So many great comments in chat. You know, the thing that I love about these discussions is we're not alone. We're all going through this, whether it be personally or with our loved ones, knowing that there's some great resources like all these books that you've written, Marni, is a great tool for people. Knowing that there's professionals that are in our audience today that can help people not walk it alone. You can reach out to Tom and his team at JK Moving and really get the ball rolling as well. So this has been a lot of fun today, Marni. I want to thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marni. Appreciate it.
Okay.
You bet.
All right, folks. Well, we'll see you. And actually, our discussion next month is with the executive directors of the National Association of Senior Move Managers. So that's going to be a real interesting discussion to learn about the trade association that all the move managers are a member of. So we'll see you guys next month. And again, thanks, Marni, and Tom. Thank you, and everybody enjoy your Independence Day holiday.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you,
guys.
Tom.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.